Now, I'm lucky enough to have driven my fair share of hatchbacks in the past couple of years, but when I think of one I'd actually choose, excluding performance variants of course, I always seem to end up back here with the Audi A3. Except last week I reviewed the Lexus CT200H, and I have to admit it threw me a bit because, well, it did a lot of things in a way that I can only describe as better than the Germans. So, to get a truly accurate picture in my head, I thought I'd give the A3 another go, so both cars are fresh in my mind. And so I can tell whether that Lexus really is just better. Let's get started. My name's Tom, and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. On the back, you'll notice it says 35 TFSI. That correlates to what's under the bonnet, supposedly, even though it's a 1.5 litre engine. Yeah, I know, bit weird. Anyway, that 1.5 litre is a 4-cylinder unit making 150 brake horsepower and 250 newton meters of torque, which is then connected to a snappy 7-speed dual clutch transmission. 0 to 60 can be done in under 8 seconds, so let's see what she can do on the 30 to 70 sprint. Well, it's not rapid by any means, but it did do 7.58 seconds, which puts it right ahead of the BMW 420i xDrive and just behind the Mercedes GLA 200, both of which are more powerful cars. So for daily use, it's a cracking engine. Inside, Audis are always a treat to look at, and this generation of A3 is pretty much perfect for me. Everything you touch exudes quality, yet there's no touchscreen nonsense like in the newer model. I really do believe this is the pinnacle of form and function from Audi. The rear offers just enough room to get comfortable in, although I wouldn't want to spend more than 2 hours back here. One thing that is a bit stingy though is that there's no cup holders or armrest back here. Even a Seat Leon gets that. The boot is still one of the best designs for a hatchback that I've seen, and that's not just because there's a lot of room. It's a nice square shape and just feels really high quality to me. A lot of other brands give their cars lovely cabins but put cheap liners in the boot, so it's nice to see Audi haven't done that here. Anyway, let's get on the road and see if this A3 can top that Lexus. So, we've done the Lexus CT200 and I was really impressed with that car, I have to say. But the Audi A3 is one of those cars that does kind of do everything, and I have driven one of these before, quite a few times actually, and I said the Lexus was superior to this, but I thought I'd just come back, review a fairly newish one, and see if there was anything that I missed. So anyway, what's this Audi A3 like driving around town? Well, gearbox is fairly smooth, suspension has that sporty edge being an S-Line car, but it's not stiff, you know, it's still a comfort orientated car. All the control weights are really pleasant to use. That's one thing I think it's kind of close to the Lexus on, is that all the control weights are fairly similar, but the steering is very close. And it's hard to tell, like the shape of the steering wheel does matter a bit. I do think the Audi wheel is slightly nicer to hold, and it, you know, it does make a difference in day-to-day life. Then in terms of parking, they're both very similar of course, mainly because they're similar in size, but I do find the Audi just has slightly better visibility, especially at the rear. And it does make it a little bit easier to park. It's just slightly more of a square, less awkward shape I find. And coming out of a junction, this is where the Lexus was slightly better. Because it's a pure hybrid system, it's a bit smoother. So engine off, half throttle. I mean, that was a good, you know, half a second before the engine even turned on there. And that's where the Lexus is really good. So I think driving around town, the Lexus still just about has it. But the thing about this Audi is, it's really good on the motorway, especially for a hatchback. So it's going to be interesting to see if it can beat the Lexus there. Anyway, let's reset our trip computer and see what MPG we can get. Before we do that though, let's have a quick taste of the handling, because I'm sure it's got to be better than the Lexus there. Right, let's go into dynamic. I can use the favourites button on the steering wheel to do that, which unfortunately you can't do with Audis now, unless you get the RS models. So it's nice to see that this particular A3 has it. Then we can put the traction into sport. This just turns the traction control off, leaves the ESC on. Then I can put the gearbox into manual, change the gears myself. And this is where even kind of a base model Audi is quite good fun. So if I put my foot down coming around this corner, they actually kind of rotate, you know. They're not super playful like a BMW, but they're not understeering messes anymore. You know, older Audis were definitely pretty understeery, but these ones are pretty good, you know. And the pickup from this little engine is actually fairly decent. Anyway, before I get carried away, let's go into efficiency and see if we can get around 50 mpg. I'm hoping we can. Right, on the motorway, and this is where Audis really do feel at home. They all do the same thing really, and that's give you this sense of security and stability when you're driving at speed. And not many other cars do that, because a lot of other cars like BMWs, whilst they're perfectly good on the motorway, they kind of want to turn into a corner and have a bit of fun. Whereas Audis, they're much more serious, they're much more, you know, they're catered towards people that just want to get the job done, if you see what I mean. And I have to say, they do it really well. There's almost zero road noise, and remember this is an A3, this isn't like an A6 or an A8 even. This is their sort of one up from base model hatchback, and it's fantastic. So quiet, there's no wind noise, no road noise, seats are comfortable, they've got plenty of adjustability. You can even adjust the pitch of the base, which you can't do in something like a VW Golf, which is nice. Steering is sharp. I mean, it just feels like you could go 150 miles an hour in this thing, and you know, it would still be relaxing to drive. You wouldn't even break a sweat. Of course, with this 1.5 litre engine, you're probably not going to be able to do that. But in something like an S3, I mean, it's amazing what they can achieve in such a small little package. Then in terms of visibility, it's an Audi, so it's really good. It's got quite a boxy shape, and like stuff like the A-pillars and B-pillars are pretty thin, well placed so you can see any blind spot fairly easily. Then the wing mirrors are nice and big. They're not the best. I actually find the ones in the Seat Leon to be a little bit better because they're just physically bigger, but these are pretty good nevertheless. Then in terms of interior quality, I mean, it's hard to beat really for the price point. You know, the only other car I'd say that actually competes with this, or is maybe slightly better than, is again that Lexus. But even then it's hard to tell because this has been designed a bit better. You know, it feels a little bit less chaotic in here. You know, everything has its place, it's a little bit better laid out, but it's not quite as hardy inside as the Lexus was. Then in terms of wear and tear, this car's nearly 3 years old. In fact, it is 3 years old. And yeah, I mean, it's perfectly good in here. It feels almost brand new, really. The only thing you notice with Audis is you get a little bit of wear on the bolster of the seat, but that's the same with pretty much any car. But the main thing for me is that the steering wheels are really hard wearing in these. If you look at BMWs, you'll notice in like 3 to 5 years they develop a really bad shine and can sometimes have the finish come off, whereas Audis don't tend to do that. They're actually a little bit better made, I think, in that department. Now then, whilst we're stuck in traffic, we may as well talk about the kind of specs that you should get for this car. As usual, I'm going to give myself 3 choices. So, what would I pick? Well, the first thing is going to be the Tech Pack, or virtual cockpit. With that, you get a slightly larger sat-nav, which is always nice, but the main piece is this virtual cockpit. Really high resolution, clear display, really nice black levels. I mean, it's almost like an OLED display, even though it's a TFT. And it's just such a nice bit of kit to use. It's so intuitive, everything is just laid out where you expect it to be. You can use Apple CarPlay with it. You've got Google Earth as your sat-nav, which is awesome. It's very accurate, shows you live updates with the traffic. It's just as good as Apple Maps or Google Maps on, you know, Apple CarPlay. So it's worth actually using, which is pretty rare for an inbuilt system these days. then the next thing, if you can go for it, is the comfort and sound pack, because that gives you heated seats and the B&O stereo. And that is something you're really going to want to have, because that is, so far, my second favourite sound system in any car I've ever driven. First is still that Lexus. That Mark Levinson system is just on another level compared to like every other car I've ever sat in or tried out. But the B&O system is still really good and still absolutely worth the money. Like 100% worth the money, especially in the A3. It differs from car to car. Like cars like the Audi A4 and A5, it's not really worth it. I would say the Audi loudspeaker system is good enough in that car. But the B&O system that you can get in this is just leagues ahead of most other cars. Because A, it's very clear, and B, it gets insanely loud, like really loud. Then the last thing I'd say to get is something that would help you in this situation quite a bit, and that is the driver assistance pack. You see, in the Lexus, their adaptive cruise control system in the CT200 doesn't work below 30 miles an hour, which for me kind of negates most of the purpose of a system like that. Because when you're in traffic like this, it's exactly when you want it. And thankfully, the system in the Audi will drive itself below 40 miles an hour completely. Keeps you in the lane and keeps you a safe distance from the car in front. And once you've lived with a system like that, you really do not want to live without it. Unfortunately, this car just has regular cruise control, so I can't really demonstrate how it works. But you'll have to trust me on this one when I say it is worth its money 2 times over at least. It's an absolutely amazing system, and Audi probably do one of the better ones on the market. It's very intuitive to use, and it always seems to work as well. I used to have it in an Audi A5, the B9 version of the A5, and I used it all the time, even driving around town when there was a bit of traffic. But for stuff like this on the motorway, it takes all the strain out of driving, and it actually makes you look forward to a bit of traffic sometimes. Unfortunately, there was a bit too much traffic, so we didn't get a 55 mpg. Still managed 52.7 though, which is genuinely decent. I was expecting it to do like just under 50 maybe, but this is fairly similar to the Lexus in terms of fuel economy on the motorway. So I have to say, as hatchbacks go, I think this is the best one for the motorway. And this 1.5 litre engine is fairly smooth once it's up to speed. So yeah, I'd say if you need a motorway cruiser, the Audi A3 is the one to get. And then if you're just driving around town, I think the Lexus is the one you want. Anyway, let's see if I missed anything last time when it comes to handling. Right, back into dynamic. Traction is fully off. We're in manual. Let's see if we can get any movement out of this thing. Audis aren't known for being that amazing in the handling department, but we can try our best. Right, let's give it some. Front end is good. Not a lot of movement from the rear though. It does hold on to the road well though. Steering is nice and predictable, fairly fast steering rack as well. You're not doing a lot of wheel twirling, which is nice. So far, still feels very safe though. Hard on the brakes. Yep, even though these are the standard brakes, they're pretty decent really. The shape of the steering wheel is the thing I like the most though. It gives you plenty of grip. DSG gearbox isn't the smoothest in the world, but it gets the job done. Changes gears quickly, that's what's important. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit sharper than the Lexus. BMW is still king with the 1 Series though in this department. Give it one more go. But the thing is, you don't really want to have to push a car too hard to have fun in it, especially on a public road. rotation. If you tap the brakes, you can get it to rotate round, but it's not going to do anything crazy. Right, down our favourite little B road. This is where Audis are actually fairly decent because their suspension setup is slightly sporty, but there's still quite a lot of give at the same time. Because this A3 is small as well, it means you've got plenty of room in your lane to move about in. And as you can see, you don't need much power when it comes to roads like this. It's all about chassis dynamics. And that's where the A3 is actually surprisingly good. You see there, all four wheels started to slide a bit. You know, it didn't kick out at the rear, but it didn't understeer either. It's a very decent little chassis, this. Right, let's do a sort of 0 to 60. No wheel hop, that's good. Gear changer's a bit rough. There you go. Not too slow, is it? Just got to slow down here because of this tractor. Do you know what? I mean, they're not boring cars, Audis. People do, like, give them a lot of hate, which is kind of unfounded, really. They're just not as exciting as a BMW, but they are not boring to drive by any means. It's a tough one, this. I'd say if you want a bit of a better flowing cabin in terms of tech and general layout, then the A3 is probably for you. But if you're looking for outright comfort and smoothness, then the Lexus is the one to go for. Which one would I pick though? Well, my most definitive answer would be this. If I were to do a lot of motorway driving, it'd just about be the A3, as long as it has the driver assistance pack. But in a city, the Lexus is just that much better. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, give it a like, and why not subscribe? Because not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which includes this lovely nano grey Audi A3. My name's Tom, and you've been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.